For this video, my friend Johnny and I went to the heart of downtown Dallas, Texas to see what the big deal was about the Dallas World Aquarium. And what we found was, while it does have sea life that you can find at any other aquarium, it's actually more accurate if you call this an indoor zoo. For this 3-part series, we're going to explore this former warehouse that spans multiple levels and ecosystems. You're going to see animals that are so rare in human care that some are only found in a handful of facilities around the world, while others are only found right here in Dallas. There's 3 levels with 5 major zones, and you're given 8 hours to find around 225 different species. As of summer 2025, admission is $31.95 for adults, $26.95 for seniors, $21.95 for children, and 2 and under get in for free. One thing aquariums are infamous for is the lack of parking. Here, that is not a problem. In fact, you can pay an additional $10 online for premium parking that's located directly next to the building. This is also one of the few aquariums worldwide that gives their residents outdoor access, and some of them can even be seen from their prepaid parking lot. If you head towards the building from North Griffin Street, you'll run into an African cichlid tank, and if you go right around the corner, you might see a giant bird that lives right over the road, who you will get to meet in part 3. We both arrived a few minutes before 8:30 and were the first ones in line. Even with that gate still closed, it only cranked up our anticipation. But what really took it even further were the calls that could be heard from the other side. And we are off. Your introduction to the inside of this building is a narrow, winding path that puts you unbelievably close to our first 17 animals. This section is best known as Borneo, although it's a little more diverse than that. You'll actually find sometimes the Dallas World Aquarium plays pretty loose with geography. You'll notice that the habitats are shaped to the curve of the path, and the fencing is either made up of mesh and glass, as you might expect, but also vertical bamboo stalks to give the critters a little more privacy. Some might say they are obstructions, especially for photographers. But in my point of view, I think the bamboo slots make you feel even closer to the birds, and I was still able to get plenty of clear pics. You should find Bali starlings, Indo-Chinese green magpies, a palm cockatoo, along with red-tailed black cockatoos from Australia. In the first 30 feet, you're presented with 4 different hornbills. Blith's hornbill, their red eyeliner and bumpy casque make them really stand out amongst other hornbills, who usually have smoother casques, like the rufous hornbills. They're only found in the Philippines. Locals call them the clock of the mountains because they seem to schedule their calls. Some sources say it's every hour, while others say they only speak at noon and 5 p.m. There's also the larger rhinoceros hornbill that bunks with the equally impressive Argus pheasants, directly next to the great Indian hornbill that lives with Victoria crowned pigeons. I've never seen so many hornbills in one place. I've never seen them mixed with other species, and have never heard them be so vocal. Right in front of the Blith's hornbill are massive and unusual Australian lungfish with Asian arowanas in their own tank. And if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to miss the ponds on either side of the path containing a giant gourami and fly river turtle on one side and more arowanas on the other. You may have noticed that we haven't even passed a ticket gate. That's because Borneo was designed as a queue, so you can observe these animals while you wait to buy or scan your way in. When you get there, grab a field guide if you want to know what you're looking at, because in terms of signage, well, they're not very detailed or present at all. So if the ticket booth is here, that means everything that we've seen so far can be seen free of charge, and that includes our next 3 stops. Inside here lives a tree kangaroo, also from the rainforests of Papua New Guinea, showing off that they're just as adaptable on the ground as they are in the canopy. And they get to live next to a legend, a reason why people from all over come to this aquarium. the yellow-billed hornbill, who cohabitates with a gorgeous Fisher's turako, who has the pleasure of always being next to shoebills, a relative of the pelican that lurks Africa's swamps, standing nearly 5 feet tall and equipped with a stare that can make a crocodile nervous, and has a clattering call that sounds like a machine gun. This prehistoric-looking predator is named after their massive Dutch clog-shaped bill that helps them snag frogs, snakes, and even other birds if they feel like it. Now, this all doesn't look like it at first glance, but their habitat is technically also outside. It's viewable from another gallery below and from the apartments across the street. So if you happen to live in one of these and are looking for a roommate, please let me know. As you already saw, one of this place's many extra treats is that it lets you get really up close and personal to almost all of its rare residents. Obviously, it's a way bigger deal when you can count the feathers on a shoebill. You can only get a view like this at one other AZA zoo in America, at Zoo Tampa in Florida. Since we already covered them, this could be the last time as a tour group we ever see this striking swamp stalker. The next species is not only physically unique, but also fairly hard to find in the United States as well. Little blue penguins, the tiniest penguin on Earth. Standing just over a foot tall, this adorable seabird lives along the coasts of New Zealand and southern Australia. A unique animal like this deserves a unique home, and it's definitely one of the strangest designs I've ever seen in any zoo or aquarium. From up here and in the gift shop, you can watch them up close and even from afar on the steps. But like the shoebill, the little blues are visible from a lower level, revealing their habitat is actually more like an open-top outdoor ledge that hangs off the side of the building, and it gives us a chance to watch them swim underwater, even if it is from a distance. After you spend some time by the cliffside, a set of steps will bring us to the 3rd level. Now, before we head straight into the forest ahead, if you turn around, the path behind us leads to the Cafe Maya. The other reason you should grab a field guide is that the menu is printed right on the back. You'll also get a sneak peek of the aquarium's finale. You can either dine in here, or if the weather's right, which I'm willing to bet it is most of the year, you can grab a seat outside where you will pass a pair of beautiful blue-throated macaws, a vibrant, critically endangered species that you might have already spotted because they can also be seen from the steps. Okay, now it's time to follow the sounds of the jungle, the South American Orinoco rainforest. It starts you off with the jungle jewels, and it's exactly what it sounds like. This vibrant little nook is home to a shimmering cast of small tropical birds, like the golden-headed manakin, famous for its moonwalk-like mating dance. The wattle jacana with its oversized toes made for walking right on floating vegetation. And then you have the colorful Brazilian tanager, dressed like it's ready for a night out in Rio. Directly across from them, you'll hit the Jungle Junction, one of the most fun mixed exhibits I've ever come across. We're talking about birds, monkeys, and one curious giant that we're all familiar with. There's a black-necked aracari, a small type of toucan that loves fruit and often nests in old woodpecker burrows. There's a Montezuma oripendola, known for its hanging basket-like nests, and because it either loves or it's trying to square up on its own reflection, you can't miss the helmeted curassow. This striking bird sports a bluish fig-shaped casque on its head. It attracts mates and enhances their calls. Now, based on Johnny's multiple visits, he says that if you want to see the giant anteaters, you may not see them until the afternoon. But it was still worth waiting hours to make sure that we didn't miss them, even if this is their 3rd appearance on the channel in the last month. Oh, and then we have the bearded Saki monkeys. If they did go to a barber, they would definitely get a 3-in-1 special. Brow and beard trim, along with a fresh cut to keep those 2 domes on their head in shape. The Jungle Junction is so tall, the birds and the monkeys, sorry anteaters, can see nearly the entire upper level of the aquarium. And while you're soaking in the sights and sounds, you don't even need to listen closely. The caws, chirps, and hoots sound like a rainforest soundtrack that you can find on a stock site. and it really makes you forget that you're inside an old warehouse. If you look just over that ledge, you'll spot a secluded forest right in the middle of all that. That will actually come into play in part 2 of our series. I won't say what lives down there, but I can say that I am most excited to show you what circles around that island. Just past the jungle junction is a darker, not so inviting path, but we're going to check it out anyways. And I'm really glad that Johnny found it because it offers a panoramic teaser of what's to come later on, with visuals and one of the most chilling sounds in the animal kingdom. This quote-unquote secret pathway comes to a dead end, so we'll need to backtrack, which will then take us to a lesser-known rainforest local, the pied tamarin, one of the rarest primates in South America. There's actually a lot more to the design of their enclosure, but you can't really see it until you're on the other side. It's actually perched up above another larger habitat, which again, we will get to later on. But I will say that it involves river wolves. At this point, there's a sign that reveals that we have been walking in the canopy section all along, but there's a fork in the trail, and we are going to go towards the right, towards a lush rocky archway. One side of the arch's wall is labeled as the Rapids, which is very loosely themed after the Andes, where you'll find white-faced whistling ducks enjoying a strong stream fed by a very small version of the misty Andean slopes. Next to the rapids is a much quieter space labeled Beneath the Canopy, home to a few more of the forest's flashier residents, like the wire-tailed manakin, the handsome fruit eater, that's not a nickname, that's its actual common name, along with both male and female lance-tailed manakins. Now that archway is an invitation into the Cloud Forest Trek that opened in 2020, a large open-air square that's home to over 25 different species. While it looks more organized than what you would expect a rainforest to look like, we were still wowed by the huge towering palm trees and what's called a monkey no-climb tree. It's a kind of silk tree that's covered in thousands of sharp cone-shaped spikes on its trunk and branches. While it is nicknamed the monkey no-climb tree, a lot of sources suggest that it evolved this way not to fend off monkeys, but against the extinct giant ground sloth that disappeared thousands of years ago. Now this is a great time to remind you that the field guide isn't always the best guide and doesn't exactly show you where everything is. That archway is actually the base of 2 densely forested habitats. One is called the Lek, named after the natural gathering space where males of certain species put on a performance to win a female's heart. And this one is home to Andean cock of the rocks. And tucked into the corner is a raptor that I didn't even know existed until this moment. The black and white hawk eagle. They like to eat animals that we've actually met today, like Orepandola, Araucaries, tanagers, and they've been observed scavenging monkeys, but not hunting them. Now please correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the reasons I may have never heard of this beautiful bird before is because they are almost non-existent in human care. And my sources say that if you want to see a black and white hog eagle outside of its native range, you have to either come right here or apparently go to another facility located in Peru. Running along the entire side of the Cloud Forest Trek is the Colombian Andes Film Wall, a huge LED screen that's 25 feet tall and 52 feet wide. It mimics the rainforest canopy above and transforms in real time, from sunrise to sunset and even into a moonlit sky. But don't get too lost in the illusion, or you might miss what lives below. Well hidden beneath a very thick curtain of leaves is a deer that's so tiny that you would have no trouble stepping right over one. The southern pudu, the second smallest deer in the world. The smallest being the northern species. Southern pudu are only 18 inches at the shoulder. They are generally solitary outside of the mating season. They're shy and even cuter in person. The back wall is one of the busiest areas in the entire aquarium. Built into the rock are 19 individual living spaces, and they're all different, whether it involves their sizes or the shapes of the glass. The one in the very far left corner contains cotton-top tamarins. Now the 18 other enclosures hold the most impressive collections of tropical frogs I've ever come across. The habitats are so well planted and misty that I couldn't even spot half of them. But that's okay, because we don't want to be too distracted from getting to know a very special mammal. This aquarium has been home to at least one brown-throated three-toed sloth since 2005. And what a privilege it was to not only see one awake, but to be able to get a perspective like this. Compared to their two-toed cousins, their head is much rounder, their face is smaller, and they have an expression that kind of gives them this cartoonish charm. They're also equipped with 8 or 9 cervical vertebrae that allows them to rotate their necks 270 degrees. Most mammals have 7, while two-toed sloths have as little as 5. Wow. Just wow. Take it all in, guys. Just in case you're out of the loop and wondering why these moments are such a big deal, especially if you've seen other sloths with your own eyes. Well, there's a very large chance those were two-toed sloths. Like every other species in the building, it's one of the rarest zoo animals in the world. They're very difficult to take care of because they're such picky eaters. Fortunately, the aquarium provides them with a constant supply of their favorite leaves and fruits to perfectly reflect their natural diet. Not many places are willing to do this. So, the Dallas World Aquarium is the only AZA accredited facility with this amazing creature. I hate to move on from them, but we haven't actually even seen half of this Orinoco rainforest yet. We have to do a little bit of backtracking though, and the very first thing that we will see is a hut. We're not going to do what everyone else does, and we are going to ignore it and turn our heads 90 degrees towards the right. Tucked into this is the pygmy marmoset. I don't really have anything for scale, but imagine like a squirrel, and now in the most humane way possible in your head, cut it in half, and that's pretty much how pygmy these marmosets are. Back at the hut, this is the toucan encounter, and apparently you used to be able to pay to feed these tuki birds fruit. These days, the official guide says that this is home to young toucans getting used to the rainforest before graduating into the big leagues, meaning one day you'll find them here, but on your next visit you might find them flying right over your head. Speaking of things over your head, I found some old photos that tells me this canopy was the original home of the three-toed sloth, so it used to put people quite literally within a toe's reach of them. Obviously, they're not here anymore, but we still have to look up. It's another example where if you don't have the field guide, you could miss them. If you look way up into the rafters, you'll see this jungle is under surveillance by howler monkeys. Now, if you've seen a howler monkey at a zoo before, because chances are you have, and chances are they were either black or gold. I feel like they're everywhere. The Dallas World Aquarium has the only red howlers in the United States. Red, black, or gold doesn't matter. You know that seeing them is really great, but I've never ever been able to hear what makes them famous until now. Looking up for that long was worth the neck pain, but the good news is we only have to do that like 3 or 4 more times. The other good news is your spine is safe for now because the animals are back at our eye level. The many banded aracaris, one of many aracaris in the building, and they get to deal with antics from Emperor Tamarins. They're tiny, zippy, and look like every art and English teacher I've ever had. Now this combo takes place in what they call the river's edge, but we are only seeing half of it right now. The wetter half and the more dangerous half will show up later. It's always a good sign that you're about to see a good exhibit when it comes with its own warning signs. You know, the kind that basically reminds you not to dangle your child over the boardwalk. Below your feet are giant crocodiles, but not just any giant crocodiles. Orinoco crocodiles, native to the Orinoco River Basin in Venezuela and Colombia. They're just as large as they are critically endangered. Crocodilians have always fascinated mankind, but not everyone is nice to them. Orinoco crocodile numbers are in the hundreds. Fortunately, there are places like the Dallas World Aquarium that work with the Venezuelan government to breed crocs here and raise the offspring for release in the wild. Now, I'm reading that they share the Crocodile Cove with piranhas, but I guess I didn't look hard enough. But I did notice there's a glass pane underwater that literally lets these reptiles stare into the flooded forest right next door. And if they don't mind a little neck pain themselves, literally right over top of them like a balcony is the Katinga Corner. But I don't want to talk about it right here because I'm hungry. I've dined while overlooking a savanna. I've dined with killer whales, but this might be my favorite restaurant experience in a zoo. First of all, my chicken club was actually really good, and one of the tables sits right next to the back end of the Katinga Corner. And within seconds, we were eating with tropical birds like we were their guests. I was literally telling Johnny that I've never had any luck with Cock of the Rocks. But of course, like 5 minutes later, as you can see, we were within inches of one. However, my favorite was the capuchin bird. They don't sound real. They barely even look real. It looks like their feathers stopped growing in the wrong place. But that's how they got their name. And it's the same reason how capuchin monkeys got their name. The feathers on their head, or lack thereof, look like a cloak that capuchin monks wear. Unfortunately, not everyone showed up for lunch. The white-faced Sakis weren't feeling it, and I would give anything to eat with the umbrella bird. They got this Elvis thing going on their heads, but in the right light, you won't be looking at their heads, but at that dangly thing called a wattle, like the ones that you'll find on a turkey. The wattle on the umbrella bird is about a foot long and inflates like a balloon to give their calls a little more boom. And once again, the Dallas World Aquarium pulled their many strings to get this one, because we were told these are the only ones of their kind in human care in the world. We're now going downhill from the canopy to the understory. In reality, an understory is the layer just below the canopy. Now remember earlier I teased this and said it was home to river wolves and left it at that? Well, I was talking about giant river otters. Their habitat is labeled as Lobos del Rio, which means wolves of the river, one of the giant otter's local names. They're not dogs, but they're highly social, they hunt in groups, they're huge for their species, and don't act as cute as they look. They're vicious and can even kill caimans. Now also, remember when I said the pied tamarins were propped in a corner of another exhibit? That's, again, this one. So the monkey space is double-sided, but the otter space, I guess you could say, is actually triple-sided. You'll see. Like an actual understory, the lighting takes a vibe shift. It's darker, it's cooler, and it's more eerie. And just ahead is another one of many open looks at the Orinoco rainforest's centerpiece, the Monkey Island. But just beyond the edge, you'll spot two enclosures. The one that's further, we'll get to soon. The other is the back part of the otter habitat, giving them more space and showing that they can roam about multiple layers. The aquarium calls this little corner the Lizard Cove, and it has caiman lizards, which are lizards, not caimans. They're actually called that because of the scales on their back resemble the scales on a caiman or other crocodilians. Right beside them, well actually left beside them, are red-footed tortoises, but they didn't seem interested, so we will move on to the row of hidden treasures. The field guide says look out for the monkey no-climb tree, as seen in the cloud forest trek upstairs. I saw no such thing down here, but I did get nose to beak with a wattled jacana and their goofy feet, purplish backed quail dove, say that 3 times fast, and a black-tailed trogon. A deep green red-bellied bird that can sing up to 46 different notes, which we didn't get to hear. I know this sounds really random, but you know who belongs in a shampoo commercial or something? Golden-headed lion tamarins. They kind of make you feel bad for their balding buddies upstairs. These ones get to room with blue-banded toucan nets. And hey guys, you'll never guess this, but again, these are the only ones of their species in human care. Maybe, you know, sometimes you can't trust those stud book keeping websites, but for the sake of coolness, I'm choosing to believe it this time. Moving on, the trail slowly opens up again and sunlight is once more filtered through at the river's edge. If you've been paying attention and that sounds familiar to you, that's because we've seen this section before. Sort of. We haven't seen the boa or the Amazon parrot, but we have seen part of this. The lower half and the better half of the tamarind and aracari enclosure. It's easy to see them in the canopy and even in the background of this display. But in the foreground lives a southern green anaconda, 2 separate slices of the rainforest in one. If you've been to a zoo with an anaconda, almost every time you'll notice that they barely have any land room. That's weird for most snakes, but anacondas are built for water. Like a crocodilian, their eyes and nostrils are positioned up on top of their heads so they can hang out almost completely underwater and still breathe and watch what's going on around them. Now, not many people will say that they had a magical moment with the snake, but this was definitely undeniably one of them. And that puts us in what the aquarium refers to as bats and bugs. It's almost exactly what it sounds like if it weren't for Cuvier's dwarf caimans. They can grow around 4 to 5 feet, so this bunch isn't even fully grown. But you gotta give them credit, they are still terrifying, but in the cutest way possible. This large quote-unquote dirt wall has a small but fun supply of tarantulas. Even though you can view them from 2 sides, I still could not find them. However, I cannot say the same about the swarm of vampire bats. Fun fact, they're a lot kinder than they look. If they don't get a meal for like 2 or 3 nights, it can starve. So the ones that did eat will actually regurgitate up a bit of blood and share it with their hungry roostmate. And studies suggest they remember who helped them in the past and might one day return the favor. It's like social bonding through blood donations, and an example of what the science world calls reciprocal altruism. The trail slopes us down and down past the crocodiles at our feet, the flooded forest, and even an electric eel. I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired of this spotty sunlight, so we are heading towards what I consider my kind of scene. Darkness. Welcome to the Toucan terrace. Now, where to begin? Well, like almost every section here, it's very feathered-centric. There's crimson-rumped toucanettes from Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Saffron toucanettes are one of the few birds capable of swallowing and dispersing large seeds intact over long distances, which helps regenerate the forest. Now, this is not any sort of toucan, but the hawk-headed parrot is a species that I stop and study its looks every single time. They're also not related to hawks, but their name comes from the feathers on their head. When they get excited, happy, or angry, they do this, which I guess kinda makes them look raptor-ish. Now, the darkest and technically deepest part of the terrace is a quiet grotto. It's viewable from up here and even the level below. It took almost all day, but we caught movement from their Hoffman's two-toed sloths. It's amazing that the aquarium offers a 2-for-1 sloth special, and it was really cool to compare the sloth that has 3 toes versus the one that has only 2. Now, the one that has 2 lives with something that once again I didn't even know existed, a nocturnal curassow. If you've been following along the entire tour, you know of a helmeted curassow, but I've never seen anything like this. Rebelling against its name, nocturnal curassows can be awake for pretty much any time in the day, in the night, and even twilight. But it almost exclusively vocalizes when the sun goes down. Just across from the grotto, the terrace opens up in dramatic fashion. At your feet is a smaller tank where you can literally overlook a fever of river stingrays. They're sort of a preview to that large pool that we've seen at every level. And I can finally tell you that island was home to a single white-faced sake when we visited. If you expected something more rare, well, it did used to have red-handed tamarins back in the day when it also looked like this, but the sake has the real estate all to itself. But the water surface belongs to beautiful black-necked swans and a very large rat. My buddy then jokingly suggested that maybe the rat is a snack for what lives below the surface. But first, remember the 2 exhibits that go to the edge of these waters? One, of course, was for the otters. The other hosts gray-winged trumpeters, and the only bird in this toucan terrace that officially wears the toucan name. And just before we head downstairs, the terrace has one last surprise perched up above the stairway. Another 2-toed sloth just hanging out where absolutely no one expects to find a sloth or really any animal. But after everything that we've seen so far, why not? So the Orinoco rainforest ends in a huge fashion down below in level 1, what's called the aquatic level. What you are looking at is the river exhibit, a 200,000 gallon freshwater tank, ironically one of the aquarium's relatively few fully aquatic features, and it's home to the building's largest animals that circle the swans and the monkeys above. The red-tailed catfish are living the dream. There are no otters, caimans, jaguars, or even humans to hunt them. And they get to be friends with Ajarami, a very, very special manatee with a bit of a lumber obsession. Sadly, we didn't get to see it, but she famously is known to carry around a log. Manatees are very affectionate, and she shows this by holding a piece of wood like it's a security blanket. If you're in the United States and you have the privilege of looking at a sea cow, it's a Florida manatee, unless you happen to go to the Dallas World Aquarium. Ajarami is not of the Florida variety. She is an Antillean manatee that naturally patrols the Caribbean Sea, southern parts of Gulf of Mexico, down to the coasts of Brazil. Antilles refers to a group of some pretty well-known islands in the Caribbean Sea, by the way. And like nearly every manatee in an American zoo, aquarium, and more, she was rescued, in her case as an orphaned calf from the waters of Maracaibo, Venezuela. We are saying goodbye to the rainforest and hello to the only gallery in this aquarium that actually reflects a traditional aquarium. And when I say traditional, I mean old-fashioned, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in this case. They're all beautifully individually themed after tropical waters from different countries. Now, I think that this is a good spot to talk about the aquarium's history because I forgot to do that on this series. The Dallas World Aquarium opened in 1992, and I couldn't really find any good sources to back this up, but my buddy and I were told this gallery was the original aquarium. And the employees said that it started out as a restaurant with a side of fancy fish tanks that you see today. Funding from the restaurant and the owner's catering company allowed an expansion in 1997 in an empty connecting warehouse, and in 2004 after purchasing an empty lot. The Cape of Good Hope. I like to say I'm pretty savvy when it comes to geography, but I'm ashamed to say that I thought the aquarium made these words up. The Cape of Good Hope is what's described as a rocky headland near the southern tip of South Africa. This is the aquarium's only true all-outdoor attraction, and it kicks off with a blue kua. This is also where you can see the little blue penguins swimming on their shelf, all while standing next to other penguins on the ground, which are native to South Africa. Like every exhibit around here, the design is kind of one of a kind. You can walk completely around the birds not once, but twice, and they can swim right underneath the pavement and your feet to access two ends of their enclosure. My favorite thing about this area is you're probably being watched by the shoebills that we saw earlier, who live right up there. And they also live above life from the nearby island of Madagascar. It had a row of mostly empty terrariums. I saw hissing cockroaches, radiated tortoise, tomato frog. There was a sign saying the blue-bellied roller was off exhibit due to the weather, but for the sake of the bird, I'm hoping that it's permanent. There are rumors in the zoo newsphere that the Cape of Good Hope will be completely demolished and converted into an all-indoor exhibit, so the temperature is just right for rockhopper penguins. But we're all still waiting on a more public announcement for this future development. The aquarium calls us back inside and puts us under and lets us walk through the Continental shelf tank. In nature, a continental shelf is essentially the shallows near the coast, just before it starts to get really deep. The glass really distorts things, but apparently this shelf is 18 feet deep. The diver was the star for a little while, but hopefully every local knows it's really the giant humphead wrasse that you want to look out for. They can grow over 6 feet long and live to see their 30s. Males have a giant hump on their forehead, and females can even change into males as they age. And they keep the reefs healthy by eating animals like the crown of thorns starfish that can harm coral. So far, we've covered the Orinoco rainforest, the cloud forest trek, Cape of Good Hope, and the main aquarium, which means we have one realm left, and it's called the Mundo Maya. Translation, the Mayan world. It starts out with a few terrariums and tanks with occasionally invisible inhabitants, but things started to pick up with the fishes of the cenote. For some reason, there's an eastern screech owl propped up near the ceiling in its own cave, so they get to watch over a special school of Mexican blind cavefish. They're naturally found in lightless underground waters, where they eventually, so-called, evolved to lose their pigment and their eyes. The Los Petenes exhibit is loosely based on the real Los Petenes Reserve in the Yucatan Peninsula. We got to see burrowing owls, but I don't know of any aquarium that displays a desert cottontail rabbit. Looks like your average backyard bunny, but it's a master at surviving in scorching dry landscapes where water is scarce and shade is in short supply. They very rarely drink what some call freestanding water, because all they need to stay hydrated is the moisture from morning dew or from the plants that they eat. There are steps and then there's a ramp, and yes, you can take both. The ramp is the better choice if you don't want to miss out on lionfish and some sort of spotted eel. The steps though are hugging an open top tank for axolotls. If you're like the one person who's been here and says, hey, I don't remember axolotls, it's probably because you were too distracted by this statue that some people think represents an axolotl. Other sources will tell you that it represents a Mexican shark or fish deity. Either way, I think it's pretty cool. We've got to see so many iconic creatures at this point that I lost count, but the most iconic exhibit is this. We just met fishes of the cenote, but the aquarium just simply calls this cenote, which, by the way, is defined as a natural pit or sinkhole formed by a collapse of limestone bedrock exposing groundwater underneath. And I'd say, yeah, the aquarium did a pretty good job reflecting that. If you've ever looked up photos of the Dallas World Aquarium, then you without a doubt saw images and videos of this. It's without a doubt the face of the building. It's a 40-foot long walk-through tunnel, and every source I've found says that it holds 400,000 gallons, which would make it the largest aquatic feature around here. But when you compare it to the 200,000 gallon Manatee River, I don't know though, it doesn't look bigger. Anyways, it's home to the endangered brown shark. At first I thought, oh wow, another rare species I've never seen before. Turns out I'm willing to bet you have seen one at every aquarium that you've been to, because brown shark is another name for sandbar shark, a very common aquarium shark. But it still does have the incredibly rare large-toothed sawfish. It looks like a shark with a chainsaw for a nose. Well, first, it's not a shark, and their nose is a rostrum that contains electrosensory organs that can detect prey. And it's lined with a bunch of teeth-like denticles, which it uses to slash through schools of fish or dig through the bottom to find food. They can swim in both salt and fresh water, and are sadly critically endangered from habitat loss and accidental captures in fisheries. Is that a fitting finale? Yes it is, but the Mundo Maya is really just getting started. This room has labels like Marine Creatures and The Serpent's Den. It goes back with more of the same with the tanks and the terrariums, except the fish and the reptiles were actually kind enough to not be shy for once. I was able to identify them later, but it still would have been nice to get some signage around here, because sometimes the field guide is outdated. But at least it was nice to see some semi-decent habitats for a change. The path around the bend makes up the House of Zots. I feel like you gotta say it like that or it doesn't count. Either way, it's a house for spectacled owls, appropriately named for its white eyebrow markings that resemble glasses or spectacles. The latest news at the aquarium says that 2 chicks hatched recently behind the scenes. They reported that this is an uncommon achievement because the chicks hatched and are being raised without human helping hands, and while spectacled owls may lay 2 eggs, they also say that it's rare for both chicks to survive under natural parental care. Across from them is an unnervingly really busy flood of cebas, short-tailed bats, which makes sense that they're here because House of Zots, technically pronounced Zots, translates to bat in several Mayan languages. While the Orinoco rainforest had us work our way down, Mundo Maya starts on the bottom floor and has us work our way up the forest and into another tall and lush atrium that covers about 1/3 of an acre. The first part of the upper level will have us pass a ocelot crocodile. They usually grow around 8 to 9 feet, and that's actually still considered small for a crocodile. The 1940s and 50s weren't too kind to them, after they were nearly hunted to extinction for their skin. But unlike most crocodilians who have been in that situation, ocelots actually bounced back from the brink, and their conservation status is of least concern. For the last time, or one of the last times, the aquarium reminds us and itself that it is in fact a place that's supposed to have a lot of fish with the Caribbean Creatures tank. There's schools of lookdowns, the biggest spiny lobster that I think I will ever see. And, I'm not against touch tanks or anything, but every now and then it is nice to see cow nose rays in a normal aquarium tank without seeing a bunch of hands dive in after them. After you pass just under the exhibit that literally acts as a barrier itself between the Orinoco and Maya attractions, where we spotted a very rare golden-headed quetzal, that'll take us to one of the aquarium's main highlights, called the Mayan Temple, a square dedicated to Bonampak, a real-life Maya archaeological site and an ancient city that's often called the Temple of the Murals. Much like they are at the aquarium, the interior walls preserve the finest examples of Mayan paintings. However, the greatest work of art over here, in my opinion, comes from nature, and that is the ocelot. They're about twice the size of a house cat, with sleek golden tan fur covered in black rosettes and stripes. The name ocelot comes from the word ocelotl, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Well, if you Google this, one source will tell you that it means field tiger, others will say that it refers to a jaguar and not an ocelot. Speaking of the big cats, if you can believe it, and knowing this place, it's pretty easy to believe that an ocelot shared this and rotated this with a jaguar up until around, I want to believe, like 2015. Now, even before I got here, I knew that there were multiple layers to this exhibit. They had access to an upper level. We did see what I believe to be that exhibit, but it was occupied by a bearded Saki monkey. Since I know you've been walking with us from the very beginning of this series, then I know you've been dying to know what lives in the enclosed bridge that goes over Corbin Street. That is actually an exhibit called the Birds of El Triunfo, named after another reserve located in southern Mexico. It's a refuge to nearly 400 birds, including the Harpy eagle, a giant raptor which is widely argued as the largest and most powerful eagle in the world, depending on who you ask. Its wingspan is longer than some of the tallest NBA players, which is double the eagle's actual length, and its talons are longer than a grizzly bear's claws. So you can imagine how easy it is for them to nab monkeys and sloths straight from the canopy. As beloved as their food is, out of fear, a harpy's stare and toenails tell me that it's probably best I'd forgive them. If you don't mind going up some steps to see one exhibit and then immediately go back down them, you'll be rewarded with the Selva Maya, or the Mayan jungle, represented by a keel-billed toucan, one of 10 members of the toucan family that can be found at this aquarium, along with the great tinamou, a shy, ground-dwelling bird of Central and South America known for its long, haunting whistles. Now, arguably the wildest looking animal in the aquarium is also one of the most common. The Caribbean or American flamingo is considered the brightest and most vibrant of the 6 flamingos. These pink funny birds get their color from foods that are rich in pigments called carotenoids. These pigments are absorbed, broken down, and deposited into their feathers. But notice anything different? Here's Caribbean flamingos filmed somewhere else. Notice the color. Now notice some of the ones in Dallas are almost blood red. Clearly, their diet is very rich in carotenoids, but a keeper did let us know that some skip the eating process and roll around in their food to achieve this exaggerated hue. Their habitat is virtually barrierless, and they could really go anywhere if they felt like it, even in the cenote tank. I don't recommend it, but they could walk on the forbidden tunnel over to the aquarium's last exhibit. Once home to the incredibly rare, almost unheard of Jabiru stork, they've since been replaced by rescued brown pelicans. They have the last exhibit on the path, but not in the last one on our tour. You know how I've said a bunch of times that if you don't have the field guide, you could miss something? Well, even if you do have the guide, you could still easily miss birds that live way up in the canopy. And you really do need a zoom lens to see them. In the northwest corner, there are 2 enclosures that are stacked. One for a scarlet macaw on the bottom and one for an ornate hawk eagle right above them. Like everything around here, you can only find them in a few places in the United States. In the southeast corner lives black hawk eagles, ornate hawk eagles' closest relative. They're similar in size and they live in the same regions, but instead the black hawk eagle patrols higher elevations. And last, in the northeast corner, I asked you all to see if you could identify this raptor. You all took the bait and guessed that it was a harpy eagle, and I don't blame you. It's actually a Guianan crested eagle, which almost looks exactly like a harpy, but the crested eagle has more patterns on its chest. Aside from its looks, harpy eagles are fairly common in human care, but this is reportedly the only Guianan crested eagle outside of tropical America. Now that we've seen almost every square inch of this place, it's time to take a step back and analyze what I thought was right and what I thought was wrong. Really wrong. I will conduct this review based on whether it's visitor friendly, but also more importantly on its educational value and exhibit quality. Like a lot of people do before they go places, I read a bunch of reviews, and a lot of people said that the expense didn't live up to the experience. The path is too tight, someone complained about parking being $10, and they said it was confusing to get around. I have a lot of critiques, but none of them involved the guest side of things. Aquariums are expensive, I get it, but $31 to see the rarest collection in America? And you'll be here for at least maybe 2.5 hours? That's cheap. That is cheap for what you get. Especially when you compare the price to other big name aquariums who don't even have like 5% of the rarities that Dallas does. Heck, some people would pay $31 alone just to get this close to a shoebill. Consider yourself lucky that there's even parking at the aquarium at all. It also could be way worse than $10. Now, the guide map is pretty straightforward. The only thing that can be difficult to find is the Cape of Good Hope. The entrance is essentially hidden behind a library. Other than that, 99% of the time you just have to follow one path. And the only time that it's so-called tight is at the entrance, but that was designed on purpose to make a proper line for the ticketing booth. Again, also just be lucky that you're able to see animals before you even have to pay. So overall, I thought our experience was very smooth. It's great for photographers, the collection is obviously unmatched, and the food was actually really good. So thinking purely from the average visitor's perspective, I have 0 complaints in the guest department. As for education in my mind is the 3rd most important factor that zoos and aquariums should focus on, behind husbandry and conservation. It should always be approached that these animals are here for a greater purpose. Let's say letting a child know that the species that they're looking at isn't doing so well in the wild, and you can offer simple solutions of how you can help. Speaking from experience, that can be so impactful and really inspire change. That being said, every zoo, even the best zoos, are guilty of not using education to the best of their ability. But this place, they don't even try. I've been to 60 wildlife facilities, and for almost every animal at the Dallas World Aquarium, this is the only place that requires you to take a map to know what you're looking at. Even then, the map is always outdated. And even if it isn't, that doesn't matter because not every species is even listed. Now, it's not entirely hopeless. There are touchscreens and QR codes that led to some pretty descriptive facts. I mean, their website is actually really good. But there's around 225 species on display, and I think I counted like 4 normal, useful signs. The rest are either screens that list an animal's name and nothing else, or it's just a compilation video of what you could see in the general area. Like, okay, you have 13 or so tanks individually themed to a different country. Would it hurt to have 13 signs that simply talk about the wildlife in that region? The organization is horrendous, and the funny thing is, they do quite a bit of conservation work thousands of miles away. But since there's nothing really to show for it, the general public doesn't know that. I mean, don't you want your visitors to know what they're supporting? You have a rescued manatee, the only one of her subspecies in the nation. But you wouldn't know that or anything else about her unless you did your research online, and I'm willing to bet most people don't do that. Also, the fact that I said on the tour, if you don't have a field guide, you could miss this. It definitely made this video more interesting, but it's not a good thing that a zoom lens is required in order to see a bunch of rare raptors. The map doesn't even specifically say, hey, we have several incredibly rare species. Look in this exact direction to find them. It isn't hard. Every other zoo and aquarium in the world does this. My theory, though, believes that the lack of signage means there's a less chance of visitors creating a pileup, and it keeps traffic flowing. But just overall, if you came here to learn about animals, unless you talk to a keeper, that's probably not happening. Now the fun part, exhibit quality. Before I get harsh, I do need to give this place some credit for being really immersive. The rock work is excellent, the environment feels and sounds like what I imagine a real rainforest would be, and a lot of the habitats are well furnished. Everyone's obvious biggest complaint, though, are about the sizes of the living spaces. And, it's bad. And it needs to change as soon as possible. Every zoo nerd, including myself, knows that this place has a reputation for stuffing animals into places where they don't belong. Most photos that I saw were like from 2010, so I thought maybe it changed a little. It didn't. I appreciate that the entrance exhibits get you really close to the animals, and a lot of that is thanks to the bamboo stalks. But the only reason you're able to get so close is because the residents have nowhere to go. I mean, like 99% of the time, parrots and hornbills get the short end of the stick in zoos, so I don't know why I was surprised. You might have to fill in the gaps of the bamboo, but I actually think these could make decent homes for medium-sized snakes and lizards. As for the fly river turtle, what and why? How do you have an AZA accreditation with that? The shoebill. I love when zoos take a risk and allow people to get this close, but when someone hands them a stick, everyone is reminded why people shouldn't actually be this close. I know it's just a stick, but where do you draw the line? Also, this is no aviary suitable for a shoebill. If the rumors are true and they are willing to spend the money on turning the Cape of Good Hope into something else, at least use the renovation to create a more proper space for the shoebills, I guess. The blue penguin exhibit, again, too small and not enough privacy. But I wouldn't mind seeing a bunch of fish and turtles in what's supposed to be an aquarium, but maybe that's asking for too much. For the macaws, how someone hasn't been fined for this is beyond me. The anteaters need to go, pied and cotton tamarins need to move, pygmy marmosets should be taken out of their what should be an insectarium, and replace the toucans that are right next to them. It's cool that you have 2 layers for giant otters, but again, it's still too small. Since the pied tamarins are propped up in the corner, if you reworked the otter space, I think it would actually be really good for the monkeys. Toucanette, parrot, another parrot, the screech owl, and the caiman, especially the caiman. How are you getting away with this? And even though it's not the last straw, the sloth on the staircase. You could easily avoid all these criticisms if you just lived up to your business's name. A lot of these would actually make decent fish tanks, which is funny because the actual fish tanks are really beautiful. And to finally cover what I bet a lot of you are thinking, as for how the aquarium is able to get the rarest collection of exotic species, well, I've seen a lot of comments both on my video and outside of YouTube that the owner, Daryl Richardson, does some pretty shady dealings to make this happen. But logically speaking, the Dallas World Aquarium is not only accredited by the AZA, they're also accredited by the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums and the Latin American Zoo and Aquarium Association, which explains his very distinct Central and South American collection. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong, for a high-end caterer turned zookeeper is a bad thing, because I'm pretty sure a lot of zoo directors are business people first and foremost, but this aquarium gives the impression that Daryl does not care or is just very ignorant to what he's dealing with. And even though it's pretty at first glance, it also looks like he created this to brag to his friends and the world about his collection and forgot to have any concern for animal welfare. It has zero educational value, and it shows other zoos and aquariums how not to display these animals. If I had to place this against the 60 zoos, theme parks, aquariums, and more that I've been to, thinking as a casual visitor, it would be somewhere around the 40 mark. But if welfare is a major concern to you, then maybe around like the 50-ish mark. My mind is telling me that I should not tell you whether or not you should visit, because I think it's more productive if people see things and judge things for themselves. My gut and wishful thinking says, no, you should not visit this until things change, which something tells me that's not gonna happen. So Daryl, if you are watching this, prove all of us wrong, because I promise people will praise you more for treating animals with respect, more than just how pretty and sensational your collection can be. And if you start thinking as an aquarist rather than a bird enthusiast, you, sir, have yourself a top 5 aquarium in the country. And I would want nothing more to come back and support your business if you make these changes. And that was my full tour and hopefully constructive and productive rant of the Dallas World Aquarium. Please don't be afraid to add your own thoughts and criticisms if you feel like it. As always, please stay tuned for the next episode. Stay wild, and thank you all for watching Zoo Tours.